And finally, the Indian students on OPT, they need to again look at other options of getting back in status because currently they're not in valid immigration status anymore. The one is we have students who've already got admission to Harvard. Some of them already have their visas. Now, as of today, those visas are not valid anymore. Is that without this certification, the students cannot stay on campus anymore.
Trump administration has upped the ante when it comes to its war against Harvard University. After stopping funding, now they've moved a step further, saying that international students will not be given visas, especially those who are enrolled with Harvard University. There's also news that's coming in of a court having quashed Trump's efforts to revoke international visas, not specific to Harvard University, but in general. To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by Dr. Karan Gupta. He is an educationist, an alumnus of Harvard University, counsels many students who wish to go and study in Harvard. Dr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. A very important, yet a very troubling decision and development that's coming. One, let's begin with what the Trump administration intends to do with Harvard University and international students, and then we'll move to what this court case and the decisions of the court really mean.
Thank you, Geeta, for having me. As a Harvard Business School alumnus and an international education consultant, I do recognize the concern and uncertainty this recent development causes for Indian students. Harvard has over 6,800 international students and 700 from India. Harvard has been a top destination for global talent, and the recent revocation of Harvard's SCVP status has caused very serious implications, particularly for those on F1 visas. Now, what this means for current students is that without the certification, the students cannot stay on campus anymore. Harvard cannot issue or maintain the I-20 forms that are required for students to maintain their valid student visa status. And these students have to transfer to other institutions if they want to stay in the US and they want to stay compliant with US immigration law. So this has caused a lot of anguish among students right now. What's even more concerning is that this loss of status affects students in the OPT status or the optional practical training status. As you know, students rely on this status for earlier career development. So imagine there's someone in the US working since 2 years because you can get a STEM OPT for 3 years. That student's STEM OPT will also be terminated. So this is what's caused a lot of confusion in the US right now.
Well, again, a very serious development. Now, you've been interacting with students and a lot of them who are applying or have already applied and have gotten through. What are the concerns and the worries of students specific to India and parents?
Okay, so we have a couple of situations here. One is we have students who've already got admission to Harvard. Some of them already have their visas. Now, as of today, those visas are not valid anymore. So that's the primary concern, that can the student travel to the US to study at Harvard this fall? And the answer is, as of today, no. Till this issue is not sorted, till Harvard doesn't get a temporary restraining order from the courts, right now, the visa that students have got for Harvard is not valid. The second concern is students who are going to apply for visas, who already have visa appointments. They need to cancel those appointments because if they land up at a US consulate or embassy, they're not going to get a visa for Harvard because their I-20 is not valid anymore. So students have to cancel existing visa appointments. The third problem that Indian students are facing, the ones who are on campus at Harvard, they're not in status anymore, and they need to transfer to other universities. And finally, the Indian students on OPT, they need to again look at other options of getting back in status because currently they're not in valid immigration status anymore.
No, you make a very important point. If I could just ask you on all three counts, the part where you say that those who are in the US, they also will not be able to continue in Harvard?
Yes, that is correct. Because the moment the government has withdrawn Harvard's SCVP status, no student could be considered legal anymore on the Harvard campus. No international student is legal anymore. So if a student is in status right now, he's no more in status the moment Harvard loses its primary SCVP status.
That's huge, because up until now we were thinking that it has to do with students who have enrolled themselves for this year, the coming semester, and who are waiting for visas will not get visas. Then there is an entire criteria 6 that the Trump administration is putting for international students who are studying in Harvard and other universities as well, but particularly Harvard, that Harvard needs to give all the details that Trump administration has been seeking, else their admissions will stand revoked. But that's not the case. You're saying
No.
Because the SCVP status is revoked, no international student can continue studying at Harvard University.
That is correct. And that's the reason why this has caused so much anguish. There are nearly 7,000 students who are affected with this decision. So the 7,000 students who are on campus at Harvard are not in legal status anymore. And that's where the real problem arises. Now, we're talking about 7,000 students on campus, plus we don't know, another probably 10 to 14,000 students who are on STEM OPT. So a total of 21,000 students are not in status with this one decision.
That is a huge number. So this indeed is a huge blow to Harvard University. Do you see Harvard buckle under pressure, or they are going to court, or is this going to become a matter for the courts to decide?
So being a proud Harvard alum and an international education counselor at the same time, what I can tell you is Harvard is not buckling under the pressure. Harvard has already filed a lawsuit in the Massachusetts federal court. They already are asking for a temporary restraining order, which they probably will get today. But they are not bowing down to the current administration's pressure, as well as the requests that the current administration has.
Okay. Dr. Gupta, there is news that we've just seen of how one of the judges in the US has blocked Trump administration's efforts to revoke international students' visa. Not particularly to do with Harvard University, but it is broad-based. So will this apply to Harvard, and will Harvard be then able to keep the international students till further decision by the Trump administration?
At the moment, no. The current order, what you're referring to, that does not apply to the Harvard situation. Harvard has received a very specific letter which puts them out of SCVP status. Their SCVP status has been revoked. And Harvard is now challenging that in the Massachusetts federal court. So this has nothing to do with the previous orders. Now, of course, the court and the judge who's listening to Harvard's current petition may rely on previous decisions that other judges have given. But Harvard needs to get a temporary restraining order to protect these 7,000 students on campus, another 10 to 14,000 students in OPT, plus an additional 7,000 to 8,000 students who are going to come on campus this year.
That's very important for our viewers. We just want them to know what an SCVP status really is. Harvard is losing its access, or the government, federal government, has stripped Harvard of its access to the Student and Exchange Visitors Information System and the program itself. Am I correct, Dr. Gupta?
Absolutely.
And what does that mean for Harvard, and how does this entire thing work?
You know, right now, the situation, we don't have any option. The situation has to become okay. Because when we're talking about numbers, just look at the thousands of students.
No, I'm saying, how does the SCVP program work, and why does that really impact international students? Just for the understanding of our for our viewers to understand.
So after 9/11, the US tightened the procedures on how they can get international students into the US. So the SCVP program is a program which is governed by the US government. Universities have to apply for certification in this particular program. Once a university meets certain criteria set out by the US government, they get certified by SCVP. And once the university is certified, they issue I-20 forms, which in turn allows foreign students to get visas to come to the US.
Right. So that's for our viewers' clarity. Now, please go ahead. Can the Trump administration, should there be a court ruling that is adverse to the federal agencies' decisions, can the Trump administration still go ahead with their decision, or will they have to stop?
What we are seeing is that Harvard is not giving in. Even in the previous issue, which was funding Harvard for research, when the research funding was taken away, Harvard refused to give in. They filed court cases that they got temporary restraining order. That process is still going on. We anticipate that Harvard is going to do the same thing now. Well, they've already done it. They've already applied for a temporary restraining order. Harvard has to solve the situation because, as we said, the situation impacts thousands of students. Students have to look at what's coming next. They've got to contact Harvard's International Student Office. Harvard has already sent out emails to all students saying that they're taking care of the situation. They've already filed a lawsuit. They even went on to say that Harvard is Harvard only because of the international students. That was actually the title of the email, telling students that without international students, Harvard doesn't exist. And also giving them the reassurance that the university is taking concrete steps to address the current situation.
What happens to students who secured a seat at Harvard, are sitting in India or many other parts of the world, and will not be able to apply for visa? Is there a solution, a temporary solution for the coming semester that Harvard has looked into, like starting an online class at least for this semester, and then move on to a physical class should they win the case? And is that a risk that any student will be willing to take, given the fee structure, the logistics, the risk of losing a year should Harvard not win the case?
Well, Harvard is considered as the global icon in education and one of the most aspirational schools to get into, particularly for Indian students. This situation started a couple of months ago when the current administration threatened Harvard with withdrawing their research grants, etc. So I believe that Harvard already has a contingency plan in place. If for any reason the situation is not resolved, they would let students do an online program for a semester and then come in January. And given how prestigious Harvard is, and assuming that they take care of all these legal problems that are there right now, students are going to still opt for it because at the end they want to graduate with a Harvard degree. They want to be part of the alumni community.
It is actually, it's going to be in the longer run, and should this continue, students, you are saying, are not going to be dissuaded from continuing their education with Harvard, even if it were online. So at the end of the day, it's the Trump administration that stands to lose a lot when it comes to money coming in terms of foreign students going to the US and studying there.
Absolutely. I mean, look what happened with Columbia. Columbia buckled under the pressure. Columbia gave in to all the demands.
Lost all the funds.
Yet lost the funds. And we still have students who are clamoring to get to Columbia this fall. So Indian and international students, they look at this as a long-term investment. You're getting a degree from an Ivy League. You're becoming part of the alumni community. They're willing to, in fact, I have students who tell me that, you know what, with the current problems, maybe we should apply to Harvard and Columbia because I have a greater chance of getting in.
That's an interesting point of view. But also, Karan, are you in touch with students? Are you in touch with students
Yes.
This year who've gotten through and are mulling what to do?
Absolutely. I have students who are currently on campus. I have students who are working in the US and graduated from Harvard who are on STEM OPT. And I have students who got visas for Harvard for the fall 2025 entry, and students who've taken appointments for getting a visa for fall 2025 entry. And let me tell you, the confusion, the anguish, the fear is across all of them. Because while they're confident that Harvard is going to get the temporary restraining order, things are going to fall in place, that fear is very visible right now. Students are petrified that what's going to happen to them. Because remember, the remnants of COVID are still there for students. Many of these students went through years of online learning. They didn't know what's coming next. And the same uncertainty is hounding them again now.
That's actually true. Karan, being a part of this Ivy League clique, we've seen Harvard take on Trump administration. Now, it is one of the universities with the biggest endowment, but you have other Ivy League universities too: Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, but none coming together. You're not looking at a united front. Imagine all the money coming together and taking on the Trump administration rather than just Harvard. How long can Harvard sustain?
This is something that has been discussed a lot among the dean circles. I mean, universities like Harvard and most of the universities in the US, they see themselves as collaborators, not necessarily competition. And many of them have been talking about getting together and jointly fighting the administration for what the universities believe believe in. And we are seeing this happening. And I think after what's happened to Columbia and now Harvard, I think a more joint response is in the making.
That's again, are we looking at a joint response or only hoping for one?
I think it's coming soon. Currently, it's only hope because we haven't seen anything in writing yet. But as far as I know, if this situation continues, you're going to see a joint response from US universities.
How long can Harvard sustain alone, Karan, according to you?
So I was looking at some numbers recently, and if they lose their federal research funding, if they lose the tuition fees of these approximately 7,000 international students, the multi-billion endowment what Harvard has, which is what, nearly 50 billion, that's not going to sustain for more than a couple of years.
That's troubling. That's disturbing, because he is going to be here for at least another 3.5 years. How would this fight continue? Because either you give in or you fight it. And if it's just a couple of years, Harvard would require support.
Harvard has been reaching out to the alumni community, potential donors. They've been asking donors to support them. Harvard has asked everybody, from current students to alumni to companies. They've asked for support from everyone. They're not shy to ask for that kind of support. And they're looking at this as a fight between what's right and what's wrong. That's what Harvard is looking at. And they feel that asking for information on students who are protesting on campus, asking for potential violations that students have done is something they don't believe in and something they don't want to share. And the current administration believes that if someone is doing something illegal, especially a foreigner in the United States, the administration deserves to know that. The current administration does not want Harvard to associate itself with any government, for example, the Communist Party of China. And Harvard believes that they have the right to talk to all governments. So what we are seeing is a fundamental fight of values. There's so many differences in what they believe in.
Absolutely. I'd asked you this earlier also when we were having this conversation, Karan. The fact that this is Harvard trying very hard to protect each student's right to speech, protecting the First Amendment in the United States of America, and ensuring that there is no breach of privacy because the government is asking for details of these students. Where else will students explore their ideas, ideologies, but at a university? In such a scenario, it is a battle of ideologies, it is a battle of values, and Harvard is trying to protect what America and Americans have held very close and very dear to their heart, the freedoms.
Right. So again, I mean, if we look at it from both sides, I completely agree. I sympathize most with the students who are impacted. For me, that's where I come from. That's the side I'm on. But when I look at what's happening in the world, and I've said this many times, students go abroad to study. Their job is to be a student. Their job is not to protest. Their job is to do what they're going for. And nobody wants foreigners in their countries creating problems. And that's where the administration is coming from. It's just unfortunate that students are stuck in the middle of this political fight, because this is nothing less than a political fight right now.
But Karan, also, it's during this period only when you explore yourself and you question governments, and that you do through protests if they're peaceful ones. Now, nobody's saying what happened in Washington. The kind of violence that you're seeing can be condoned, but they're two very different things. Peaceful protests, calling for stopping certain actions by certain governments is very different from the incident where we've seen a shootout outside the Jewish Museum.
Geeta, again, I mean, look at that fine line, what's there right now. I mean, sometimes students tend to cross it, and when they cross it, that's when the problem occurs. I mean, I think of this for our own country. Today, in our country, we would not support any foreigners who are having violent protests, or even foreigners who are getting into protests, which something which we as a country don't believe in. Our first reaction would be, you are not an Indian citizen. Why do you even have a voice here about this particular issue? The same thing, the US is saying the same thing, that you're a foreign student, don't interfere and don't bring global politics onto university campuses. Focus on your education. So if we look at it from both sides, there's a fine line which sometimes students are crossing.
So you're saying that students right now are being advised to be careful in what they say, how they express themselves on social media and elsewhere as well?
100% yes. Students need to keep some of their political opinions to themselves. They do not necessarily need to share them. Talk about other things, talk about your subjects, talk about your classes, talk about why do they need to talk about political opinions. And if they do, and if that's not in line with what the current administration is thinking, those students will get into trouble. The current administration has made no effort to hide the fact that if you're against them, you're going to be in trouble.
Okay, so it is in a way an extreme position that the Trump administration has taken, but also, like Dr. Karan Gupta said, advising students to stay away from larger issue of politics, if and should they want to go and study in the United States of America. There is one judgment that has come, but it is not specific to Harvard, because Harvard has been stripped of its SCVP status, and therefore international students, Indians and others, whether they're looking to go to Harvard or whether they're already at Harvard, are in trouble. Dr. Karan Gupta, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global.